Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight, I'm going to be streaming to you, just doing a little fall review for units 1 through 3. All right, so as always, please follow us at Think Fiveable. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. There's lots of other contents out there. So if you are taking another AP class, or if you know of another student who is taking an AP class, please direct them to this site because there's so much good, rich content that is going on, and we don't want y'all to miss anything. Tonight specifically, we are going to be, as I stated, we're going to review Unit 1, Thinking Geographically. I have some key concepts there that I would like to review with you. We are going to do Unit 2, Population and Migration, and we're going to hit Unit 3, Cultural Patterns and Process. And I fully hope that by the time we're done with this stream, that you will be able to fully comprehend key concepts from Units 1 through 3. It's just totally impossible for me to hit every single thing, especially from the fact that all across the country, we're operating from different textbooks and everything. If there's something that you want clarity on and it falls within one of these 3 units, and the thing is a lot of the stuff that I'm going to review, they cross over into other units. And so really being able to see how they connect with other units is important as well. But if there's anything that I've missed or something that you want me to hit, there's a ask the question tab. Please click on that. I'm going to ask you to use some emojis during the evening. So make sure your emoji game is strong, because I want to make sure that I can gauge your level of understanding, or if I'm going too fast or too slow. So with that in mind, I've decided that I'm going to start a little backwards. I'm going to start with the cultural patterns and process. Then I'm going to work my way through the population and migration. And then I will feel so bad if we don't make it through all of the thinking geographically. If you are a Plus member, I will include my slides here for you, and I'll include a link so that you can have access to it. It's just a great way to review. So with that in mind, and all the introductions and everything out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is our cultural unit. And in our cultural unit, we're going to review 2 key areas. We're going to review those cultural frames, review how culture frames the shared behaviors of society, and we're also going to review how culture varies by place and region. So let's just go ahead and get started by just reviewing our cultural wills. Let's talk about that a little bit. And as you should have gotten to in your cultural unit, we understand that culture is the shared practices, technologies, attitudes, and behaviors. I love these cultural wills. I have 2 here because some of the information on it is a little different. But having that firm understanding that culture makes up our belief systems, that it's what we speak, it's our language. Y'all should have gotten to those language trees and things of that nature, and the diffusion of language. It's our rituals, it's our food, it's our values, it's our traditions at home, our art, music, all of those things make up our culture. So having a solid understanding of that is really key for the cultural unit. Next thing that we need to talk about is globalization. In your cultural unit, you should have walked away with a firm understanding of the role that globalization plays in culture. We're living in the 21st century. So as opposed to the 1800s or the 1700s or the 1600s, it took a long time for things to be shared. Not anymore in the 21st century. Now we can share our culture at a rapid pace. And please forgive me, I'm sucking on one of these Ricolas because I have a sore throat. So please forgive me. So globalization, things are able to go around the world a lot quicker because of the advancement in technology. Everything is right here at the palm of our hands with our laptops, cell phones, and our computers and everything. So understanding the role that globalization plays in culture is key. Next, let's take a look at our world religions. Is a really big unit within culture, and y'all should have really gotten down deep with studying the various religions and what the various religions are classified. And I love, which just goes back to the things that you would have learned in your unit 1 related to maps and the story that maps have to tell. So remember, this is a map that you're looking at, and whenever you come across these visuals on your AP exams, for your FRQs, you want to keep in mind that this map is telling a story. So we want to look at, and then also keep in mind that this is a geography course. So when we are studying these various phenomenons and these things such as culture, where does it play out globally? On the world, in the world, and where does it play out upon the landscape? So let's examine our regional patterns. We want to examine our regional patterns of language, religion, ethnicity, and understand how all of these help to identify a sense of place for us. So when you're looking at this map, what is it that you notice? If you could type that in there, what's the religion that dominates in the Americas? If you could type that in there, so that I can see, because we need to understand, where is religion on the landscape, and where do we see any other similar patterns? So take a moment to just type in there what religion you see in the Americas, and where else is that religion located. Being able to identify those things. Let's also take a look at where's Islam located? Where's Buddhism located? What are the, you have Judaism, where is that located? So looking at that. All right, y'all are a quiet bunch tonight. So you should have had Christianity as the major religion that's being practiced in North and South in the Americas. All right, but that's not all. That's not the only story. These maps are telling us something else. So when we're looking at, from a cultural standpoint, when we're looking at patterns of religion or language, I came across this great resource that takes a look at what religion people identify with by region. So having a look at that, and I love this. It says magenta is Christianity, blue is Islam, yellow is mostly everything else. So looking at these patterns, I love looking at maps and engaging the information. Here's another one: Protestantism by country, population, and percentage. And so looking at these chloropleth maps, if you remember learning about like the various types of maps in your unit 1, you know that the deeper the color, the greater the population that follow that. Here's another great one, looking at Catholicism, and where it's practiced, again, looking at that grid at the bottom from lightest to darkest. So understanding what is the story, where is religion diffused across the world, where is language diffused across the world, and understanding the sense of place that you have connected with that. So I have some other maps here that just kind of take a look at Islam by country and population, and also take a look at Muslim denominations by country, population, and percentage. So make sure that when you're going back over your notes and looking through your textbook and looking at the various maps and graphs and things that are in your book, that you understand how culture plays out in these various forms. All right. Let's move on. Let's take a look at landscapes of symbolic cultural identity. We want to look at signs, architecture, and sacred sites. When we're talking about culture, it's not just our language, it's not just our beliefs and our religious practices that we practice. It's also, how does culture show up on the landscape? How do we bury people? How do we, what are our sacred sites like? So those are important things to take into consideration as well when we're talking about how does culture show up in the landscape. Also, architecture wise, when we look at various spots in the world, how do our buildings represent our culture? If you remember, if we're talking about Middle Eastern areas of the world that may be Muslim, a lot of their cultural things that represent their culturally who they are in the form of architecture would be like the dome-shaped buildings. So be sure to keep those, to keep that in mind, and I hope that that's a concept that you're solid with. Next, how is culture diffused? Having a thorough understanding of the diffusion of culture is extremely important. And remember, diffusion is how did that thing spread around? How did it get to where it is? Where did it start from? And where is it going? And where is it now? And so when we're talking about diffusion, this is where we should take a look at contagious diffusion, also known as viral. And remember, with our AP Human Geography, you always want to remember those additional, that concepts have another name. So you want to make sure that you know, okay, there's contagious diffusion, viral. There's hierarchical diffusion, that's, power. Oh, I'm sorry. I think that these are what they're associated with. But a lot of times in AP Human, you're going to have more than one concept, like when we're talking about our regions. So contagious diffusion deals with like viral. It's spreading really fast. And I love this illustration that I have here, which I got from one of the textbooks. You could kind of see the green dot is the hearth. It's where that thing started. And then it spreads out, and it's usually quick, rapid, and fast how that spreads. And so we know some cultural things spread fast and some are very slow. Hierarchical, you want to remember that that's from one higher point and then it trickles down to the other areas of maybe lower level influence. So when we're talking about the fashion industry, and we're talking about how fashion is going to spread, most of the time it's going to start from our fashion capitals, right? It's going to start from like Italy or France or New York City. Stimulus diffusion. We want to keep in mind that stimulus diffusion is that when that thing moves, when that thing spreads, that some aspect of it is going to change as it gets to that next location. So, McDonald's is global, it's all over the world, but what does a burger look like in various countries? So in India, they're not going to have a Big Mac. They're not going to have a quarter pounder with cheese because cows are sacred. So that's going to be more vegetarian based products. So that's your stimulus diffusion. Oops, I just lost my PowerPoint. Give me one moment. There we go. The next one we want to take a look at is relocation diffusion. Just the fact that that idea moves around. It starts in one spot, it moves to the next spot, it moves over there to another. So all of that is part of how culture is spread around. It's spread through one of these methods. All right. And I promise you, I'm going to have a check with you in a moment. Next, we want to take a look at Hearths. So you want to remember that that's where that idea originated. It's where it started. It's the center. And you should have studied the 5 cultural hearths of where kind of civilization started, but there's agricultural hearths. But when we're looking, this one is cultural hearths. And so this is kind of letting you know, these are the areas where that it was like the cradle and things started here and then they spread out from there. But they were hearths for, for culture. And so you should have in your class reviewed the, Mesoamerica being number 1. We see that, that would have been your Aztec, your Incas, your Andean American populations, Peru, that area. We have our Western Africa civilization over there in 3, Nile Valley. We know about the Egyptians and things of that nature. So this was another area. So if you could just take a moment and just let me know what's your level of understanding before I move on. Could you do like a, emoji with the hearts or a smile or a cringe or I'm not too sure. I'm confused. Are you clear so far on just a few concepts that we've covered so far about religion, about the landscape, about the various types of confusion? Thank you, Jonah. Perfect. Thank you. I sure do appreciate that. And then just a few other thank you to hearts. Okay, that's good. So I hope all of this is not alien. But as we're going through, we're going to make sure that you have other, as we go through the year, just make sure that we just keep these things. So constantly read stuff to make sure that you're up to date. And can stay present and making these connections about how these concepts show up in the real world. All right, we're going to keep moving. So some other things that you should have studied in your culture unit, related to language, should be this whole concept of lingua franca. Everybody has a language. I mean, if y'all have looked at that language tree and y'all studied all the Indo and languages where everything has started, you know that it is vast. And there are so many languages that are spoken all over the world. But when we're dealing with business, what's going to be that common language that we communicate in? And so that's your lingua franca. And so you should remember that the lingua franca it's the language of international communication. It's used for trade. Speakers of 2 or more languages are going to agree on this is the language that we're going to speak. I remember when I was in college, I took 2 years of Swahili, and because it was a lingua franca, not that I can remember hardly any of it. I can remember how to say I love you, mimi ni kupenda. And but if you look here at this graph that I established, that I found on the internet, our largest spoken lingua franca or language for business purposes, of course, is English. So Wall Street, we have our economic center, but quickly coming up behind that, you have Mandarin, because there's so many folks. So we really need to, if you're not learning a second language, you need to do so. And if you do know a second or a third language, kudos to you, because you have an advantage over so many of us that only know our one language. But I put here lists of like other lingua francas that could be found. So of course in East Africa, you have Swahili. In South Asia, you have Hindi. In Southeast Asia, Indonesian. And Mandarin is, look how large it's expanding here. So you should have walked away with that. Also in the cultural unit, it would be impossible to talk about culture and the spread of culture without talking about the role that colonialism and imperialism played on, the rest of the world. So keep that in mind and have an understanding of colonialism. I love this graphic that I have here is, it's sending settlers to another area and exploiting it economically. One nation conquers and rules over the others, where imperialism is basically doing the same thing, but with military force. So when we're talking about colonialism, it's like, oh, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to live and I'm going to stay. And then I'm just going to have some more folks to come and more folks to come and more folks to come. But imperialism is, oh, we coming and we bringing the military with us because you're not about to stop us. So you have to understand that role, and you see it. And especially when we get to the economic and the political development unit, you're going to see the role that colonialism and imperialism played. So when you start thinking about Africa, and when you start thinking about why is English spoken in the United States? Why is Spanish spoken in this area of the world? Why is French spoken in West Africa? Why we have Dutch in other parts of Africa? So make sure that you have a thorough understanding of the role of colonialism and imperialism. And I love this. This was a visual that I found that just kind of shows you, there's this political cartoon that kind of shows all of these political leaders sitting at a table, and they basically have, Africa, and they're carving it up like this piece for you and this piece for you. And we call that the scramble for Africa. So you can see Portugal, Spain, France, United Kingdom, Germany, Belgium, Italy. All of these were, first of all, diffusion took place of those cultures, and colonialism and imperialism played a role as well. So, all right, next, when we're talking about culture, we can't talk about culture without speaking about acculturation, assimilation, syncretism. So I have here, again, you probably have, that understanding that assimilation is the process by which a group or culture, a group's cultural features are altered to resemble those of another group. And I thought that this was such a great visual when we think about our Native American populations, and we think about the fact that, when settlers started coming over, they wanted to assimilate, because that would be, a easy way in helping to control the group of folks. Also, we want to take a look at acculturation. You should have an understanding of acculturation. It's, again, the process of change in a culture as a result of two groups meeting. So it's not like I'm just taking over and I'm dominating. It's like, oh, let's take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And because we're meeting, where syncretism is that we're going to combine these elements and then make something totally new. So having that understanding is something you should have walked away with. Then in our religion unit, you should have taken a look at ethnic religions and universalizing religions. And with our ethnic religions, those would be like Hinduism and Judaism. And I put here, they appeal primarily to an ethnic or cultural group or the people of a specific region. And the other thing about ethnic religions is that they don't go out and convert. They're not looking like, come, I need you to be a part of me. Like that they're not doing that. They're just in their region. Where universalizing religions such as Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, they spread through expansion and relocation. And I wrote here, attempts to be global. So globalization plays a part to appeal to all people wherever they may live in the world, not just to those in one area. I love this. I found this chart segueing to folk culture and pop culture. And I just think that this is a great visual. So you should have had a conversation in class about the difference between folk culture and popular culture. And I just love this list. There's so many good, juicy things here. So they're talking about folk culture is isolated, it's immobile, it doesn't move around. There's not going to be diffusion really taking it to a bunch of different spots. It's attached to one place. It's homogeneous. There's one group that's practicing it. They have customized production, changes from place to place, small isolated group, where popular culture is going to be the masses. It's highly mobile. It's always moving around and changing, and it gets around the world quick. It is fragmented. It is heterogeneous. It is mass production. When you start thinking about fashion and how quick something can take place on the runway of Paris, and then all of a sudden, it's in Target and Walmart and Macy's and our local stores. So popular culture is going to move really fast, and a large group of people are going to be practicing it. I loved this. I'm not going to go into detail, but I thought that this graph really did a good job of breaking down each of the standards for AP and really putting it into categories. So, a culture for folk cultures has a cultural tradition practiced by a small rural homogeneous group, popular culture, cultural traits found in large urban populations that are heterogeneous. So this is a really good one to take a look at, and I would love for you to go back. And I made sure that I included the links on the side. So if you're a Plus member, you'll be able to go back, access my slide, and find where the sources where I got these from. And before we end on folk and popular culture, just another way to break it down when I think about, our Amish or our Hittite populations, those you should always have a visual in your mind of what are real examples of what Mrs. Tubbs is talking about. What are real examples of how I can find this in the world? And when your teacher is explaining it to you, what are real examples of how I can find that in the world? And you should be able to provide some examples. So if I say cultural hearths, you should be able to say, okay, I know that we have, in America, there was, Mesoamerica. I know if we're talking about universalizing religions, you should be able to come right off the bat with what those are. And so, when I think of Kanye West and his Soul Sundays, that's popular culture. Like he's all over the place right now. So we're going to end our cultural unit review. And I just want to ask you, do you have any questions? How are you feeling about what we have hit so far about lingua franca, about colonialism, imperialism? Do you have any questions? If there's any questions that you have, just go ahead and put them in the ask questions and I'll make sure that I get to them. Are you solid on the role of colonialism, assimilation, acculturation, syncretism, before I move on to our next? Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing some hearts there and some happy faces there. Thank you for that. All right, so let's go on. Whoops, let me minimize here. Let me go to our next unit. So the next place that I want to take you is to our population and migration. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I feel as ninth graders, y'all were hitting a lot this year. And I know, especially if you're, coming from eighth grade and you've never done this level of reading, this level of writing, this level of analyzing, but I just love, this population and migration unit. So this is a little bit more interactive. And so this is a stream that I've done before, but I always think that it's good to revisit. So let's go ahead and see what you remember from your population and migration unit. So let me hit you with this first question. I want you to name that concept, and let initials are fine. If you want to just type those initials in there, you don't have to type out the whole entire word. I think I'll get it. So you should have studied this concept. The total number of live births in a year for every 1,000 people alive in the society is known as, type that, ooh, yes. And CBR stands for crude birth rate. Absolutely fantastic. All right, next one. I think I'm just going to kind of move through this. The total number of deaths in a year for every 1,000 people alive in the society is known as, correct, crude death rates. Ooh, y'all are on it. Okay, I'm going to keep clicking because y'all seem to be moving right along. All right, another concept that you should have hit in this unit: the total number of, I have the total number of deaths in a year among infants under 1 year of age for every 1,000 live births in a society is known as, what did you get for that one? Absolutely fantastic. IMR, the infant mortality rate. Gonna keep moving. The percentage growth of a population in a year, computed as the crude birth rate minus the crude death rate, is known as. So yes, there's a few times where y'all need to, You won't have to do calculations, but you would at least need to understand the calculations and how they work. So what did you get for this one? So I'm getting some NIR, absolutely correct. And NIR stands for natural rate of increase. So I know that y'all have this, and I think that this is a wonderful review. All right, so what does TFR? So I'm switching it up, so you'll have to type a little bit. What does TFR stand for? And you don't have to type out the whole entire definition, but I want you to think about what is the definition and what number represents the replacement level. So if you can, you could type it out, but I would love to have the answer to that first question as well as the answer to the last question. So far I am getting that TFR stands for, absolutely correct, total fertility rate. So this was something that you should alert, and I hope that you realize that I'm getting ready to lead up to something else. If I'm reviewing birth rate, death rate, NIR, I hope you know where I'm going next. And so total fertility rate is the total number of children born to each woman in a given region during the course of her lifetime. So basically saying this is the number, because men can't replace themselves, so they need women to help with the replacement. So if we're going to maintain our population, we need to have at least two, me and my spouse or significant other of who I am replacing. And that number for total fertility rate, which is what I just said, is close though. It's 2.1. All right. The next thing that you should have taken a look at is this fancy little thing right here. Can you name this structure? So you should have taken a look at this in your population and migration unit. Can you tell me what this thing is? And so the definition that I have here is that this graphical illustration shows the distribution of various age groups in a population, typically that of a country or region or of the world. So it can be broken down into various scales, and that's something else we'll get to when we get to Unit 1. So this is known as, yes, a population pyramid. I'm not going to spend long on this, but you just need to make sure that you understand the components of a population pyramid, how to read a population pyramid. You need to understand that at the top of the pyramid, we have our elderly. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have our youth. You need to understand the bars, and that typically on the right side, even if there's no labels on it, on the right side, we're going to have our males. On the left side, we're going to have our females. We're going to have these bars that stretch out. Each one of these bars are known as a cohort. You need to understand that the people at the top and at the bottom are a part of our dependency ratio. I hope you're nodding your head and remembering those concepts. Maybe your teacher called it, something else, but it's called your dependency ratio. You need to understand that the folks who are in the middle are the ones who are supporting the folks at the top and at the bottom. You should have a thorough understanding of what the population shapes mean. And I hope you know where I'm going with this, that if you see a population pyramid with the shape all the way to the left, which is kind of like the little going in triangle, that is a rapidly expanding population. If you have a pyramid that's just like a perfect, from the base going up to the top, that's an expanding because you have more kids and they're eventually going to go up. That if you see that dome shape, that's a stationary population, and that if you see that dome shape, but then it caves in at the bottom, then we have a population that is eventually going to decline. So make sure you just have an understanding of these various shapes. All right. We also, in our population and migration unit, You should have also talked about what causes our populations to change. So I want to know, what are these factors known as? They're either going to be push or pull factors. So if I am leaving an area because there are better jobs or lower taxes or nicer climate or better schools or more room or lower crime, better medical care, what is the concept? What is this concept known as? Now, I'd love to see who can chime in first here. Are these going to be push or are these going to be pull? Absolutely, they're going to be pull factors. And so then I'm still going to have you chime in. If where I'm living there is famine and war and a lack of jobs or job opportunities or disease, violence, or high crime or overcrowding, what are those factors going to be known as? All right, very, very good. Those are going to be our push. They're pushing us out of the area. And the ones that I mentioned before, that's gonna draw me to that area. That's gonna pull. These push factors are gonna push me out. But if there's better jobs in Chicago than there are in Texas, then I'm going to be pulled to that Chicago area. Y'all are on fire. All right, so I want to know a title for this. When we talk about migration, these fall under a certain category. So, financial costs, do I have the money to leave? Emotional costs, Megan, do I want to leave my family behind? Knowledge of opportunities in that new place. Personal characteristics such as gender, economic status, and age, being elderly and or poor, and government factors. Does anybody remember from what their teacher taught them of what the category for this would be? These are going to be known as your barriers. These are things that could hinder you from migrating. I don't have the money. I don't know much about that area and what job opportunities they have. So I'm not going to go to Georgia. I'm going to go to California. Being elderly or poor. I can't make that trip. I'm 80. I'm stable here where I am. So let's move on to our next little checkpoint, still dealing with population and migration. Can you fill in this blank for me? The permanent move to a new location is known as. Now, this is where we've done population. Now I want to get into the second section of population. And so that's this concept. So I think I kind of gave it away. I hope I did. So the permanent move to a new location is known as, it starts with the M. Very good. Thank y'all. Migration. Awesome. Yes. All right. So I want you, in your population and migration unit, you should have learned about the various types of density. So looking at this map, make sure, and I hope you can read it. And if not, I'll read it for you. You should have walked away understanding the various types. So this says farmers per square mile, kilometer of arable land. So I hope you know what arable land is. Arable land is the true land that's suitable for farming. And what type of density was this called? And I hope that you recognize what type of map this is. Starts with a C. It's a chloropleth map. So again, remember, maps are telling you a story and the gradients are telling you a story. You should have gotten agricultural density. Absolutely. So the ratio, the number of farmers to the total amount of arable land or the land that's suitable for farming is known as agricultural density. Can you tell me what type of density this is? The number of people per unit of arable land is known as, what is this type of density? And I'm not the best speller in the world, so I will not, try your best. But what was this density? And so again, the notes that I have here that I didn't put on the screen, but I just wanted to share with you is it's the number of persons per unit of agricultural land. This number is helpful because it gives us a rough estimate of how many people per parcel of farmland the land can reasonably support. So this really is a true, it gives you a true depiction of how much the land can support the people. And if you put physiological density, you're absolutely correct. All right. Now, in your population and migration unit, you should have also taken a look. So what concept does this image represent? So the dots represent cities with at least 1 million people in 2006. So you should have discussed this concept, and I want to make sure that you understand. So first of all, once you identify the concept, you should be able to tell me, these three things are important. And so you should remember them. And I'm hoping you'll chime in. They are the three largest population. Okay, urbanization. Okay, so these three are the three largest population clusters in the world. So in your population and migration unit, you should have also taken a look at, where does the majority of the world's populations live? And most of them are in the East, not in the West, but we're going to examine that in a moment. So you should know that the three largest population clusters in the world can be found in Europe, South Asia, and East Asia. And if we want to narrow it down more specifically, again, remember, we want to take a look at scale. And that's something else in Unit 1 you should have taken a look at, is being able to analyze things from like a global scale, a national scale, a regional scale. So we're going to take a look. And whoops, I went too far. Sorry about that. This still on that concept of clusters. Do you remember what this image represents? It's if you identify, we have, Maine all the way through Virginia. Does anybody remember what this population cluster in the United States is called? It's the largest in the United States. The majority of the people live in this population cluster. They live in cities. Does anybody remember? Did y'all study this? Because it's a major concept to remember. All right. So this is known, the shortened term is known as the Boswash Corridor. So it's the corridor between Boston, over here, Boston and Washington, DC, that Virginia area. And so the majority of the folks in the United States live in this population cluster. All right. Another thing that you should have taken a look at is immigration or immigration. So I kind of have this fill in the blank here. So here's the definition. To leave a country or region to live somewhere else is known as, is it the E or the I? Sally blinked from Brazil in 1995. Many people blank from Germany in the 1800s. I want to know which immigration this is. So you could either type it out or you could just put the E or the I. Absolutely correct. Immigration with the E. So you need to know whenever you're leaving, whenever you're exiting, that's your immigration with an E. All right. So if that's the case, to come to a new country or region to live there, when did you blank to Canada? My grandparents blanked to Canada in 1952. Is that going to be the E or the I by process of elimination? You should have absolutely the I. So remember, exit means to leave. That's the immigration with the E. Incoming with the I, that's your immigration with an I. Thank y'all so much. Y'all are so on fire. All right, we're almost to a little check-in point. We talked about push or pull factors. but I want you to tell me, just looking at these images, would this be a push factor or would this be a pull factor? So, if there's pollution and the jobs are closing and you have some type of natural disaster, is that going to be your push or your pull? Absolutely. Good. That would be your push. All right, let's talk a little bit about, we can't leave our population and migration unit without talking about various migration concepts that you should have came in contact with in your population and migration unit. So I want you to name this type of migration. Let me see if you can recall and bring back to your mind, man, what were the types of migration that we studied? And if you need to run and get your notes or flip open your book, that is fine. If I start in a village and then I move to a small town and then I go to a larger town and then eventually I end up in a big city, what type of migration would that be? Suburbanization? Nope, it's not suburbanization. It's not urbanization. Urbanization would be just the process of living in a city. I'm talking about the type of migration to get to that urban area. I didn't do it all at once. I didn't go straight from the village to the big city. A ladder has this, to go up a ladder. What do we call those things? If you have a 2-level home, well, yeah, okay, it could be known as internal migration. So that would have been a good answer as well. I was thinking more of step migration. So remember, I'm not moving, and interregional would be good as well, but I'm not moving all at once, because I could internally just go straight from the village to the big city. So you need to keep in mind that step migration is, I'm doing it in little smaller steps. All right, let's take a look at this one. Here's another type of migration. Can you tell me what type of migration it is? Name this migration. I get up in the morning, get dressed, I go to my school, I leave my home and I go to my school and I do my job for the day. And then when I'm done with, I'm sorry, let me not talk about it in terms of me being an adult. Once you go to school for the day, maybe you go to Popeyes, which is your job, or maybe you go to the gym, or maybe you stop at, you like to go to the library, and then you go back home. What type of migration is it when you have this pattern that you flow in, when you're moving about in your everyday activities? What type of migration? It's typically, let me just give you some other little key things. It's typically short term. It's repetitive movement, which occurs on a regular basis. It's journeying. This could take place either every day, and it could be from recreational spots. Does anybody remember what type of migration this is? You should have circulation migration or cyclical. It's in a circle, it's a cycle. So that's a type of migration that you should have hit. All right, name this concept. It's a type of migration again. 1910 to 1970s, African Americans leave the South for northern cities. This is an example of which type of migration. Was it forced? Was it voluntary? Was it, what type of migration would it be? Is it chain? Is it forced? Is it voluntary? What type of migration would that be? So they've chosen to move. It's usually for economic reasons. So there are usually push factors and pull factors involved. Excuse me. It could also be for, I think about the fact that when I think about the reasons why my mother left the South and my aunts and them went up to the North, it was it was a lot of this. Absolutely correct. Voluntary. All right. Little check-in. Let me get your emoji on. Tell me how we're doing. Wow, it's already 8:53. Where has the time? Where has the time gone? Where has the time gone? So how are you feeling about, voluntary? How are you feeling about the different types of migration? How are you feeling about push pull? The two different types of immigration, the Boswash Corridor, the population clusters in the world, the various types of density. And I want you, you should always have a pen in hand. If there's anything that you are struggling with, I want you to jot that concept down so that you can go back and review it in your spare time, which I'm sure you have so much of. Okay, really good. So we're almost done here. Here's another. Could you please tell me what type of a migration is this? Would this be voluntary? Would this be forced? Would this be chain? What type of migration would this be? Is it step? Is it What category does it fall into? So again, just remember, maps are always telling you a story, and I love this because I would talk to my students about, as you're analyzing this, look at how thin and fat some of the arrows are, because those arrows are also supposed to represent volume. And if you look down in that lower left-hand corner of the map, it's giving you the number of enslaved people that were moved out of Africa and taken to these various spots. So let me see what you got here. You have that it is forced. Good, very good. All right. Let's take a look at this. I want you to name that type of migration. So migrating from Turkey to an ethnic enclave, that's something you'll get to in your political unit, to ethnic enclave in Berlin, Germany. So these folks have, why is it, and I love this, make sure you take a look. I know you probably can't see it that well, but each of these colors represent a different ethnic group that has moved to Germany. So if you look, I've started with Turkey, and all of this red represents the Turkish enclave in Berlin. If you look at the dark green areas, those represent the Italian enclave in Berlin. And then they have like the orangey areas are the Netherlands, and pink is Russian, and the lime green is Vietnamese. They're from Vietnam. So did you get to this type of name this migration? All right. So this type of migration is known as chain migration. So the reason why you have such a large Turkish population living in this area of Berlin is because there are already other Turkish people who are living there. I'm from New York originally, and so I think about, New York is so rich. We have Spanish Harlem, and we have Little Italy, and we have Chinatown, and we have all of these ethnic enclaves. We have a large Puerto Rican population and Dominican population and Caribbean population. Well, why are so many of those groups there? Well, typically their families come in a chain. Somebody came before, now somebody else is coming after. All righty, let's keep it moving. Oh, 8:57. The concept of blank refers to a general term covering all types of movement from one place to another. It starts with the M. Does anybody know what that concept is called? And just making sure that you have an understanding of, just your ability to be able to move means that you are let me see if you get it. You should have mobility. All right. Let's keep it moving. Yep, thank you. Yes, Bridget, thank you. Mobile, perfect. All right. Okay, can you name this concept? This image represents the following concept. So really take a look at that map. The part of the earth that is suitable for humans to live on is known as, it starts with an E. So this is a concept you should have gotten in contact, come in contact with. Oh, we're getting to my favorite part. It was so, I need another hour. There's so much stuff in units 1, 2, and 3. Ecumene. So you should have that this concept is known as, yes, Amy, thank you, ecumene. All right. My favorite, I don't know why, I absolutely love this. Can you please tell me what this is? What's the 3 letters for this? This should have been a big part of your population and migration unit. Yes, absolutely. So this is known as the demographic transition model. And there, I mean, I could just spend a whole entire stream just talking about, but let's just review it a little bit and just pick up on the key things. If we look here, this gray line represents our birth rate, the black line represents our death rate, the red line represents our total population, which contributes to our national increase rate, the rate of natural increase. Make sure that you have a thorough understanding of the demographic transition model, what is happening in every single stage of this model. Make sure you understand the names of each of the stages. If you saw these stages by themselves, just like broken up into a segment, make sure that you understand that 1 is the high stationary stage, that nobody is in that stage anymore, that we only have a remote groups, maybe groups in, Aborigines in Australia, or, some of our groups that live maybe in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Nobody is here anymore. Make sure you understand, I told you Chad would go, make sure you understand what is going on at each of those stages. Have a go-to example of countries that are located in each of these stages. Also, what goes along with this, and I'm going to click through, I had this great thing where I was just going to go through each of the stages with you and just kind of talk about them individually. Again, if you look at the stream, and if you're a Plus member, please look at the PowerPoint and find the PowerPoint. Is it okay if I just take a few more minutes and can y'all hang with me for just a few more minutes? So make sure you have an understanding of each of these stages and that you know what they mean. And also you need to understand how the population pyramids connect to each one of these stages in the demographic transition model. The other thing that is thoroughly connected to the demographic transition model is you should have an understanding of this graphic, which is known as the epidemiological transition model. And the epidemiological transition model talks about what caused people to die at each of those stages in population change. So you should know at the very beginning of the stages that it would have been pestilence and famine, and that the reason why they were having so many children, but was because so many children were dying. And so you should understand that, and just understanding that the reason why our population, our birth rates, our death rates are low is because now we have modern medicine, we have vaccines and things of that nature. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to say, are there any questions related to, because I felt like I rushed through the DTM, but do you have a solid understanding of the demographic transition model? understanding the various types of migration, chain migration, understanding step on, chain voluntary. Is that okay? All right. I see one person chimed in. All right, I'm going to finish out Unit 2 and talking about population and migration. And if you gotta go, you gotta go. I do understand, but I'm on a roll, and I mean, like I said, there's so much to hit here. Um, Also, in relation to to the population and the migration unit, you should have come across this concept. So I want to know from you, what does the red line represent? So, you should be able to look at graphs, read the graphs, read the X and read the Y axis, look at what it is, what's the information that's being conveyed. So we have our numbers of individuals, we have over time, we have growing rate of that the population is growing, and then the growing rate of decrease. But this red line represents, and I hope that my image of my globe here of the world holding up all these people give you a clue. And let me just say this. The term is the largest number of people that the environment of a particular area can sustainably support. And there will come a point where our land just simply cannot sustain the people unless we figure out alternative forms of, living and feeding and, housing all of the people of the earth. Absolutely correct, y'all. So you got it. Carrying capacity. And when we talk about carrying capacity, no conversation or review on population and migration would be complete without talking about this man here. So you should have come across in your class talking about Malthus and talking about his theories on population. And basically he was saying there's going to, and you have to remember the time period in which he was writing and making these, his assertions about, where we're going as a people and what the earth could do. And so looking at this, you should have walked away with the understanding of what he thought about population. And he was saying, look, we can't keep increasing our population and still have a steady food supply, that we are going to have these natural checks that will help to decrease our population. And so I've included a slide here because you always, when you're studying these theories, I love to give my students a theory sheet, and I want them to know about Malthus. You need to know the time period because his theory was based upon the time period that he was living in. And then keeping in mind, are those theories still applicable in the 21st century and the time that we're living with our technology? And so this was Malthus's theory, his principles on population. And you should have also gotten to neo-Malthusians, and that's like a rebirth. So they're basically just saying population growth is still increasing greater, but it's taking place more in poorer countries of the world because of medical growth and growth of wealth. They are not increasing their food production as quickly as they are their population. Neo-Malthusians also believe population growth is stripping the world of many of its valuable resources like energy. So that wasn't necessarily something that Malthus was thinking about. He was purely thinking about like that food supply. And then understanding the critics. Besserup and what she was saying about population growth. She was like, nah, this is wrong. We're not going to come to this doom, because her thought was humans are smart. We're always going to be able to figure out a way to increase our food supply and to be sustainable. So make sure you look over and understand, Malthus's theories. And then we're going to close out by talking about our population policies. And you should have learned about in your population and migration unit, expansive population policies and eugenic population policies. So, and neonatalist versus antinatalist population policies. So expansive policies would be those that encourage you to have children and to expand the population. And then there were eugenic population policies like, they were designed to favor one racial or cultural sector of the population. So keep in mind, what are my countries that would have that? What would be my countries that would encourage a group to have children and not? Wrapped up in that should be like the one-child policy, talking about what took place with that one-child policy, talking about Nazi Germany during that time period and what was being done to sustain the Aryan race and to decrease the Jewish population. That would be your eugenic population policies. And then in our countries that have an aging population, going back to that population pyramid, what is Japan? Japan has an aging population. What are they doing? Russia has an aging population. What are being done in those countries to encourage population growth? So are there any questions? Is there anything in that population unit that you're like, oh, I would like some more information about that, or I could really use, some more stuff. So if you don't mind sharing, I feel, okay, so the epidemiological transition model, look, I'm writing this down. Okay, I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to go back to that slide. Is there anything else? So let me, while y'all are still gathering your thoughts, because I don't want to leave and you not understand. All right. So this is known as the epidemiological transition model. And epidemiological just means the reason why people die. I mean, that's what it is. And so you want to make sure that with this, you should be able to take the demographic transition model and you should be able to put stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. So this is letting you know what took place in each stage of the demographic transition model that caused people to die in each of those stages. So I'm going to go back just for a minute, if you just bear with me, because I want to just kind of. So if you take a look at the demographic transition model, and it states it really kind of here, if you look down at the bottom, but the epidemiological transition model gives it to you in chart form. But if you look at the very bottom of this graph, it's telling you what is the reason why birth rates are increasing and death rates are dropping. So if you look at stage 1, the reason why the death rate was so high, epidemiological, like what was causing people to die, there was disease, there was famine, there was no medical care. They didn't have antiseptic during that time period. They didn't have Neosporin to help clear up a room. They couldn't go and get a tetanus shot. So that's why so many people are dying. So that epidemiological transition model, it's just telling you why people died. If you look in stage 4 of the demographic transition model, it's the opposite. Like, why are people living so long? The United States, Japan, France, like we have medical insurance. We go to the doctor, we get a checkup once a year. We have, depending on your health insurance. So those are the reasons why. So that's all that epidemiological transition model. So whenever you're looking at it, take a look at it and take a look at the DTM at the same time, and just make sure you basically understand the reason why people are dying in each and living longer in each of those stages. Does that make sense? Could you give me a thumbs up if that makes sense? And then Rowan, you're absolutely correct. You just really need to dig into there's no secret. Read your textbook. Get yourself a and I wish I should have brought them downstairs. Like, I have a Kaplan review book. I have 5 Steps to a 5 review book. Get yourself a really good review book. I feel like my favorite is the Kaplan, followed by the Princeton Hall. I just like the Kaplan because in the back of the Kaplan review book, it will give you the reason why the right answer is the right answer and the reason why the wrong answer is the wrong answer. So that's our time. We're 14 minutes over. I had so many slides left over here for thinking geographically. But I think that you will be okay. If you want me to send you this PowerPoint, just reach out to me at, let me type my email address here in the comment box, and I can send it to you, and then you can review, and then you would have access to the links and all of that. So it's Sherelle Tubbs at att.net. And if there's anything that you need and you want to have access to this, I will gladly share it with you because I have little notes in the comment, in the notes section, and you can go on and click. So write that down and just, if you could, because I get a lot of emails. So if you could let me, like in the subject line, just simply put, unit review PowerPoint or slides or something like that, and then I can share it with you. But please join us again. I am going to skip ahead. These were the slides that I was going to share with you, just where we were reviewing, different types of maps and different types of scales and things, and talking about absolute and relative location and looking at site and situation. And let me see what else I had here. Clustering, directions, taking a look at the different types of maps. But a lot of this stuff, you're going to find the beauty about Unit 1, thinking geographically, is it shows up in every other unit. So I feel really good in knowing that we got through, I was going to do time-space compression and things. So I feel really good knowing that we got through what we did. So again, reach out to me. If you, I have notes and things here. If you, just remember to always, at Think Fiveable, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and we're on YouTube. It has been absolutely my pleasure reviewing with you tonight. Y'all have an absolutely fantastic evening, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Good night.